Hello, lovely people. So, one of the things I want to talk about today is a certain visualization that I do repeatedly when I want to remember what it feels like for that exquisite joy that I like to use when I get into certain meditative states before I cast out a spell. I think a lot of times we talk about within the witchy community the ideas of feeling our energies in our bodies and like casting it out, but it's like, what is that? What does that feel like? And a lot of times when you're speaking of manifestations or bringing things in, invoking stuff, a lot of it comes to our feelings and sensations in our bodies and getting us to a certain point where we feel that elation, that power, that joy, that tingle that kind of like goes through you, that shiver of, ooh, that was significant. And one of the ways that I like to get myself into that state is through visualizing an old memory where I remember feeling it previously. It can be hard at times. We're told often to, we're told often to visualize what we want to come into our lives and visualize it as it's currently happening. So you're gonna come join the video. She needs to be on a lap now at all times. Very needy recently. So we always talk about the future and what we want to invoke, what we want to bring in. And again and again and again, I've had the question of, well, how do you know what that feels like if you've never really experienced it? You know, people have this idea of like, oh, you can conjure the sensations up with your visualizations, but at some point you're kind of using your previous experiences to possibly reference and or create the situation to be something that seems realistic to you, right? You're taking all your previous knowledge and you're wrapping it all up together to saying, I think it might look like this. And then you let the universe come in and place the rest of the pieces of what possibly is left out. And in that, I think sometimes the easiest thing to do is maybe not even visualize exactly what you want to invoke, but go back to a time where you just felt that pure joy, that pure power, that moment in time when for almost no reason it seemed to show up. And so for this, what I do is I sit down, I get as quiet as I can, kind of go through a little bit of cataloging first in my body to get my mind off of all the other wandering things. So like, how does my shirt feel on my skin? What does my temperature of the room currently feel like? Listen to my breaths, count my breaths. Be hyper focused and aware of all my senses for a moment so that everything else kind of falls away. And when I realize that like my brain is calmed down and like I'm not wandering off too much, I try to think of what is the very, very first memory that I felt a sense of elation, of joy, of like overwhelming, just almost like, I almost can't even describe it as, it's almost like an eruption from the chest, a pure just like a euphoria almost. And sometimes it helps too, I think, to journal this out. Like what was this moment? Describe in detail how old were you roughly? What was the sense? Like, was it warm? Was it cold? What was happening around you? Describe in as much detail as you can this memory. And maybe it happened a long, long time ago. Maybe it happened recently. Maybe it's a little fuzzy around the edges. It doesn't matter how significant or insignificant it feels. It doesn't have to be a major life event. It could be something as simple as you remembering this one specific time you had coffee in your house, or you know, just a moment where everything was peaceful and quiet one morning before school. Like whatever that small little bit of moment in time is for you, just catalog and write it all down, or think about each individual thing in your brain about what it all looked like, what it all felt like, what was the exact moment when you felt the sense of joy kind of overwhelm you and overflow in you. What was it? And I think going back to this memory repeatedly is helpful because it reminds us that, yeah, there was this one time when the whole world seemed to like just get quiet for a moment and everything was so joyful and lovely, and you just felt that overwhelming good feeling. And from that, you could hopefully create more moments like that in your life and use your magic to hopefully invoke that type of thing. So I'm about to describe mine for you. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of how small or possibly insignificant this could be. So I remember being drenched. My hair was all wet and kind of sticking to my face. I was young, probably no older than like 8. And around that time I was on the swim team, and I would go to swim practice, and it was an indoor pool, so it was in the middle of winter. And I remember like being all bundled up in my coat and sitting in the car, and my mom has the heat cranking and she's driving me home, and we're driving towards our house. In the town that I lived in, there was a river that ran right through the middle of it. Seriously? The town, and you have to drive over this one bridge. And because the middle of winter, must have been sometime in December, because the entire town has all the twinkling lights put up in this area. They're all kind of all over the bridge where there's lights, and each little stores in this small little main street area have their lights on, so everything's kind of glowing and glistening. And I remember it was wet. It hadn't quite snowed yet, but everything was just, you know, just that little bit of dampness, so all the lights were like catching on all the concrete, all the stone of the bridge, on the streets. All of it was kind of like a little bit of glistening. And so I'm there and I'm wet, and I'm wet with some stickiness. I can still smell a little bit of the smell of the chlorine from the pool, and I'm bundled up in my jacket. I'm sitting in the back, and I can't even quite remember if my mom had music playing or she was talking or anything, but everything is kind of that warm, soft, glowy feeling, and very just twinkle lights and a little all like out of focus type of thing. And then I remember distinctly when the feeling of just joy seemed to kind of erupt from my chest, and I turned and I looked to the right as we were crossing over this river, and in the distance there was this big old pine tree that someone had taken and decorated with a whole bunch of lights all the way up. And it was there kind of near the edge of where the river was. And so because of that, and the lights are just kind of cascading and rippling over this whole river and the entire little downtown area of this main street are all like kind of gathering, and they're all dazzling across the river and the water. And I just remember looking over and thinking, oh, everything is just so pretty and soft and perfect right now. And then we crossed the bridge, and the feeling slowly creeped down and faded till it like went away. And then I went on to do whatever I did. Like that literally the memory is just of this moment of, we hit the bridge, I'm seeing all the lights, I feel this elation joy, I remember feeling the wet, I remember smelling the chlorine, everything seems a bit foggy, and then turning and seeing that tree and the dazzling lights across the water, and feeling that just pure joy fill me up from my chest and go on out and then slowly fade away. To my recollection, this is the first time I've ever felt this elated joy, and it kind of seemed for almost no reason. There wasn't any, I don't remember doing exceedingly well at swim practice. I don't remember being extremely excited about whatever it was that was home. It was just one small moment of joy for joy's sake, for me appreciating everything that was there in that current moment. And it's the earliest time I can really think of this, because everything else beyond that, where this feeling of joy did pop up in other times that I can remember, are later on in my life. But going back to this pure simplistic, very like childlike view of just, yes, this is good. This is why life is really good right now, is mwah to me. And so I go back to that when I'm feeling like I need to tap into that joy, or if I feel like I've forgotten what that feels like, or think of like what are moments where that could happen to me again. I kind of go back to that. I sit down, I try to get into a very concentrated state, and then I just visualize myself being that 8-year-old kid in that car again, and let those feelings of joy kind of take me over for a moment to get myself back into that state. Because sometimes it is as simple as reminding ourselves that we felt a really good feeling for no other reason than we just felt it when we were younger. And it can take the smallest thing really to trigger that in us. I found myself being very cognizant recently of wanting a big win, of wanting a big reward, of wanting a huge something to come in and make me feel really great again about life and about the direction that life was heading after all the chaos and other horrible things that have popped up for me since the pandemic started. But sometimes the joy does really come from the smallest of things, from the small little teeny tiny moments that seem so fleeting, and how quick, and it can fade just as quick, but that doesn't make them any more insignificant than those big moments. And honestly, if I really think about it too, the biggest moments, me graduating from grad school, moving across the country, like big ass accomplishments, many times don't seem to give me that sudden joy feeling. It's funny when I think of like times when like I felt really joyful and successful, it's always quiet moments that almost someone would look at as very mundane and not a big deal. I remember the first time I really felt really happy about moving to Portland was when it was kind of rainy, a little gloomy. I'd been living here for about a month, and I just took a walk around town, and there was just enough drizzle so where I could like feel the rain, and like everything was just kind of again coated in that like wet, so everything's like a little glistening type of deal. And I remember just walking around and feeling that chill on my skin, and I hadn't felt it in so long, and like that was the first real moment of joy. It wasn't the moment I unlocked the apartment or got everything put away right, or even when I signed a lease or any of that. It was a month later when I felt really at peace, and I was like, yeah, this is why I moved here. Like this is that good joy feeling. It's the same thing that's happened before, like romantic relationships. It's not necessarily the first meeting or the second date or so many dates in. It's that weird random moment you don't even really think of. They just say something or do something or grin a little bit, and something you just like look at them and you're like, ooh, uh-oh, I really like you. Like that really sparked something in me. That moment was like, ooh, like it gave me a certain joy that I wasn't expecting. And with work too, it's not the promotions, new job or whatever, like those feel really great, they feel awesome, but oftentimes it's when I'm in a flow state on a project where I'm really excited about, and I suddenly feel that joy kind of overwhelm me, like, yeah, this is, if I could do this for the rest of my days, if I can get into this mode at least once a day, oh, like it makes me think of, oh, this must be what people mean when you do what you love. And even if I could just get that moment for 5 minutes out of my day and the rest of it is hard work, like that doesn't matter. Like this is the fun part. This is the really, yeah, oh, I feel like I'm jiving. It's always those small moments. It's that I feel the overwhelming elation and the joy. It's not the big things so much. And reminding myself of that, and knowing that there are going to be other moments throughout my life where something small is just going to take me off, is going to catch me off guard, just like that tree as I was being driven across a river with my mother and seeing the glistening lights. For some reason that just caught my eye and made me feel so happy, beyond even a way of me truly being able to describe it. And so I like to remind myself of that and recreate those in my meditations, because if I can get back to that center of joy and reminding myself it's random weird occurrences where that happens, then I think I'm focusing more on the right things and how I want, and less about the really big asks, because even if I get the really big ask, that's not the thing that's going to bring me the most joy throughout my life. Anyway, try this out. What is your earliest memory of pure joy? What is the instance where you were like, yeah, no, that was wow, the first time in my life where I felt real big happiness? What is that for you? Comment down below. And remember, it doesn't have to be a major big memory. What is this, the first time where it was, you know, it could be something so small as just a sip of coffee one morning when the light looked just right, or when you smelt a smell for the first time. Like, what is that earliest memory for you where everything was really good? And try it out and let me know down below if this meditation helps at all with any of your manifestations and such. Anyway, that was today's video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.